when her phone buzzed. It was a message from her relatives. "Join us for dinner, it's time you stop hiding." She stopped in her tracks, staring at the words. Her hands felt cold. For a long time, she had been pushed aside by her own family, always called the failure, the one who never lived up to their standards. And now, suddenly, they wanted her to come. She stood there, debating with herself. A part of her wanted to ignore the message, to protect her heart from more pain. But another part whispered that maybe, just maybe, they were finally ready to welcome her back. Deep inside, she still craved their love, their acceptance. That evening, she prepared slowly. She picked out her simplest dress, not fancy or expensive, but neat and clean. She looked at herself in the mirror and sighed. "Maybe tonight will be different," she whispered, though her heart was heavy with doubt. As she stepped out of her small apartment, memories came rushing back. Every harsh word, every time they compared her to her cousins, every moment they reminded her she was nothing. Yet she still hoped for peace. She still hoped to belong. Clutching her little handbag, Amara walked toward the restaurant, her chest tight with both fear and hope. She didn't know what awaited her, but she knew one thing: this dinner could change everything. Amara arrived at the upscale restaurant in Kololo Hill just as the evening lights lit up the city. The place was grand, filled with the soft sound of clinking glasses and gentle music. She paused at the door, her palms sweaty, her breath unsteady. For a second she thought about turning back. But then she forced her feet forward, telling herself, "You can do this." As she walked inside, her eyes landed on her family gathered around a long table near the center. The men laughed loudly, throwing their heads back as if they owned the place. The women wore elegant dresses and designer handbags, their faces glowing with pride. Everyone looked so polished, so perfect, like a picture out of a magazine. And then there was Amara. Simple dress, worn shoes, a small handbag she held tightly as if it were her shield. The moment she stepped closer, she felt eyes on her. Her cousins whispered behind their hands, their eyes scanning her from head to toe. Some smirked, others just looked away, pretending she didn't matter. She heard one soft voice, sharp enough to cut her. "Why is she even here? She brings nothing but shame." Her chest tightened as if a heavy stone pressed against it. She wanted to disappear, to vanish into the floor, but she forced herself to stay calm. With shaky steps, she reached the table and sat down quietly at the corner. No one stood to welcome her. No warm hug, not even a polite smile. It was as if her presence had spoiled the perfect picture of their night. Her uncle glanced at her, then returned to his loud laughter as if she wasn't even worth a proper hello. One cousin rolled her eyes dramatically before sipping her wine. Another leaned close to the person beside her and whispered something that made them both chuckle. Every sound, every glance felt heavier than the last, pressing her deeper into her chair. Amara's fingers tightened around her handbag, holding it close to her lap like a child holding on to safety. She could feel her face grow hot, her throat tightening with unspoken words. But she didn't speak. Not yet. She told herself, "Stay strong. Don't let them see you break." The waiter poured water into her glass, and even he gave her a pitying look, as if he sensed she didn't belong here. Amara lowered her eyes to the tablecloth, hiding the tears threatening to escape. She had come with a fragile hope of peace, of reconciliation, but what she met was coldness. Sharp, cutting, merciless. Still, deep inside her, something whispered, "Endure this moment. Just endure." She didn't know it yet, but the night was only beginning, and the same. People mocking her now would soon be stunned into silence. The food was served, and the clinking of cutlery filled the table. To anyone watching from afar, it might have looked like a happy family dinner. But Amara felt the sharpness of every glance, every whisper. She sat quietly, hoping that if she stayed small and silent, the evening would pass without more pain. But it didn't take long. Her cousin Nandi leaned back in his chair, smirking. His voice carried across the table, loud enough for everyone to hear. "So, Amara," he said, dragging her name out as if it were something bitter. "Still unemployed. You must enjoy being useless." The table erupted in chuckles, forks pausing mid-air as people turned to look at her. Amara's stomach tightened. She forced a faint smile, pretending she hadn't heard, but her silence only encouraged them. Another cousin, Layla, raised her perfectly shaped eyebrows and added, "Honestly, at your age. No husband, no career. What do you even have? At least one of those things should have worked out by now." Her voice was smooth, but her words cut deep. A wave of laughter spread again, louder this time, mixed with nods and whispers. Someone clapped their hands as if it were a comedy show. Amara sat frozen, her heart pounding in her chest. Every word felt like a knife stabbing her pride, her dignity. She lowered her gaze, staring at her untouched plate. Her fingers trembled against her handbag. She could feel her throat burning, her eyes welling with tears, but she blinked quickly, refusing to let them fall. Not here. Not in front of them, she told herself. Her uncle shook his head, pretending to sound wise. "I always told her parents," he said loudly. "This girl will bring nothing but disappointment. Look at the rest of you, all shining, successful, married. And then look at her. Such a pity." The table went silent for a moment, and Amara wished she could sink into the chair and disappear. But then the laughter started again, filling the space, bouncing off the walls, each sound echoing in her heart. Even the waiter glanced at her with sympathy as he refilled glasses, as if he could feel the cruelty cutting through the air. Amara clenched her jaw. Her breaths came slow and shaky. She wanted to scream, to defend herself, to tell them the truth about who she really was now. But her voice stayed trapped inside. She wasn't ready, not yet. Instead, she held on to the only thing she had left at that moment, her dignity. Sitting tall, keeping her tears hidden, she whispered silently to herself, "Endure. Just endure a little longer." But deep down, something inside her shifted. Each insult, each laugh, was adding fuel to a fire she had kept buried for years. They thought she was weak, worthless, invisible. But soon they would see. The night grew heavier with every word they threw at her. Amara sat quietly, her food untouched, trying to focus on anything but the sharp voices around her. But the insults didn't stop. They only grew bolder. One cousin leaned back, pointing at her plate. "Careful, Amara," he said mockingly. "That dish might be too expensive for you. Maybe you should have ordered just water." Laughter rolled around the table like thunder. Amara's chest tightened, her hands trembling as she tried to keep her face calm. She gripped her fork, but her fingers were shaking too much to even take a bite. She placed it down gently, hoping no one noticed her struggle. But of course they noticed everything. Her aunt leaned forward, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Don't worry," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "If she can't pay, one of us will cover her meal. Just like always." The words hit Amara like a slap. A wave of heat rushed to her face, and before she could stop it, a single tear escaped and slid down her cheek. She quickly brushed it away, but it was too late. The table exploded in laughter. Cruel, heartless laughter that filled every corner of the restaurant. Some even clapped their hands, while others shook their heads as if her tear was nothing more than entertainment. To them, her pain was a joke, her humiliation a show. Amara sat frozen. Every sound echoed inside her chest, breaking pieces of her spirit she thought she had already lost long ago. She wanted to scream, to shout at them, to walk away, but her body refused to move. She was trapped, cornered, drowning in shame. The waiter glanced at her again, his face tight with discomfort. Strangers at nearby tables were beginning to notice too. She could feel their eyes on her, some pitying, some judgmental. She wanted the ground to open up and swallow her whole. Her heart pounded so hard it hurt. She pressed her hands against her lap, trying to steady the shaking, trying to breathe. In that moment, she realized this wasn't just dinner. It was a battlefield, and she was the target. But deep beneath the pain, something inside her stirred. A spark she had buried long ago. She had endured years of this same humiliation, years of being mocked, overlooked, dismissed. Tonight they had pushed her too far. As she sat there, wiping the single tear from her cheek, she made a silent promise to herself. This will be the last time they laugh at me. The very last time. What no one at that table knew was the truth Amara carried quietly inside her heart. They thought she was useless, weak, a failure. But while they laughed at her, mocked her clothes, and whispered about her being nothing, Amara had been working, silently, tirelessly, and without their support. When the world slept, she stayed awake, her eyes burning from the glow of her laptop screen. Night after night, she taught herself, learned from mistakes, and built something piece by piece. With trembling hands but an unshakable will, she started a small online store, selling handmade African fashion to people across the world. What began with only one order and doubt from everyone around her grew into hundreds, then thousands. Every insult they ever threw at her became her fuel. When they said she was useless, she worked harder. When they said she would never succeed, she stayed up later. She poured her tears, her loneliness, and her broken heart into the business until it began to bloom. Now, her company was exporting African designs to Europe, America, and beyond. Celebrities had worn her pieces, magazines had featured her collections, and her bank account held more money than anyone at that table could imagine. She had become a millionaire, not through luck, but through grit, sleepless nights, and pain turned into power. But Amara never flaunted it. She didn't drive flashy cars or wear loud designer labels. She didn't post pictures of her wealth online or throw her success in anyone's face. She lived simply, choosing peace over pride, because she knew envy could be more dangerous than poverty. She wanted love, not jealousy. She wanted respect, not fear. Yet here she was, sitting in the middle of her family, being treated like the poorest one in the room. None of them had any idea that the very woman they mocked could buy the entire restaurant if she wanted to. None of them knew that her small handbag carried a platinum card powerful enough to silence their laughter in an instant. As the voices around her grew louder, as their jokes became sharper, Amara sat still, her secret locked safely in her chest. She let them laugh. She let them mock. They thought they knew her story, but they only knew the first chapter. Inside, her heart was steady now. The humiliation had reached its limit, and so had her silence. She realized she didn't need their validation anymore. She had built her own life, her own empire, and soon, whether they were ready or not, they would see the truth. That night, they thought they had broken her, but in reality, they were seconds away from discovering the woman they had underestimated all along. The night dragged on, filled with laughter that wasn't hers, words that cut deeper than knives, and stares that made her feel invisible. Amara sat quietly, her food untouched, her hands resting tightly over her small handbag. She thought she had heard enough, that nothing more they said could hurt her. But the moment came that changed everything. The waiter walked toward their table, holding the black leather folder with the bill inside. His steps were calm, professional, but Amara could feel the tension rise around the table. As soon as he placed it down, everyone leaned back casually, as though it was a routine. The wealthier uncles shifted in their chairs, already being looked at to handle it, while the cousins giggled softly, certain of what would happen next. One cousin glanced at Amara and smirked. "Of course, Amara won't even touch the bill," he said loudly, his tone dripping with mockery. "She has nothing." The words hit her like a slap. Everyone laughed again, nodding, agreeing, as if it were the most obvious truth in the world. They expected her to sit quietly, to lower her eyes, to let the moment pass like always. But this time something inside her snapped. Her hands shook as she reached for the leather folder. The table fell into sudden silence. Forks stopped clinking, glasses paused midair. All eyes turned to her, surprised, curious, some even amused. Amara's fingers touched the folder gently, almost nervously, as though it carried the weight of her entire life. Her chest rose and fell, each breath heavy with years of swallowed pain. For a second, she almost pulled her hand back. Almost. But then she tightened her grip and drew it toward herself. Her voice trembled, barely above a whisper, but strong enough to be heard. "I'll take care of it." The words hung in the air, shocking everyone. The silence was so sharp that even the background music of the restaurant seemed distant. Some cousins exchanged glances, smirks returning to their lips as though this was another joke to laugh at. Her aunt even let out a small chuckle, muttering, "She's lost her mind." But Amara didn't flinch. She held the folder close, her heartbeat racing, her palms damp with sweat. For years, she had been the quiet one, the weak one, the one who never spoke back. And now, with just a few words, she had turned the entire table upside down. The waiter leaned forward politely. "Are you sure, ma'am?" he asked softly. Amara lifted her chin slightly, her eyes glistening but steady. "Yes," she said firmly this time. "Bring me the bill." The table stayed frozen, their laughter gone, their faces a mix of disbelief and hidden nervousness. They didn't know yet, but in that moment the power had shifted. At first, the table burst into laughter again. To them, Amara's words were nothing but a joke, another moment to laugh at her expense. One cousin clapped his hands, saying, "Oh, this should be good. Let's see how she pulls this off." Another whispered loudly, "Maybe she'll try to pay with coins." Their laughter echoed, bouncing off the restaurant walls, sharp and cruel. But Amara didn't flinch this time. Her face stayed calm, her hands steady as she reached into her small handbag. Slowly, she pulled out a sleek black platinum card. Its shine caught the light, making a few people at the table squint. For a moment, they didn't even register what it was. They thought it must be fake, some cheap card she was pretending to own. She slid it across the table to the waiter, who took it with both hands, his brows lifting in surprise. He glanced at Amara, then at the card, then back at her again, as though silently asking if she was truly serious. Amara only nodded once, her eyes steady. The waiter disappeared toward the counter, and a strange silence settled over the table. The laughter had slowed to nervous chuckles. Some cousins exchanged glances, their smiles fading. A few leaned closer, whispering questions under their breath. Where did she get that card? Could it be real? Minutes later, the waiter returned. His steps were slower this time, his expression different, almost respectful. Standing tall beside Amara, he placed the folder gently in front of her, bowed slightly, and announced clearly for everyone to hear. "Transaction approved, ma'am. The full bill, paid in one swipe." The sound of his voice cut through the room like a knife. Silence fell so heavy it was almost deafening. Forks froze mid-air. Glasses hovered untouched. Every pair of eyes at the table widened in disbelief. Amara's relatives sat frozen, their mouths half open. The same cousins who mocked her seconds ago stared at the folder as though it were a bomb. The same aunt who sneered about paying for her meal pressed her lips together tightly, her face pale. No one dared to speak. The entire restaurant seemed to notice too. A few nearby diners turned their heads, curious, whispering about what had just happened. To them, it was clear that the woman who had been humiliated all night had just turned the tables in a single moment. Amara sat back in her chair, her posture calm but her presence powerful. She didn't smile, didn't gloat, didn't say a word. She simply let the silence speak for her. The power had shifted, and for the first time that night, it wasn't Amara who looked small. It was them. Amara sat there for a moment, letting the silence stretch. She could still feel the sting of all the cruel words spoken that night, but now something inside her was different. For years she had lowered her eyes, kept her voice quiet, carried her pain alone. But tonight, she couldn't stay silent any longer. Slowly, she lifted her head. Her eyes were wet, her cheeks still glistening with tears, but her voice came out steady, clear, and strong enough to cut through the heavy air. "For years," she began, her gaze moving across the table, "you called me useless. You laughed at me, mocked me, treated me like I was nothing." No one spoke. Their eyes darted away, shame slowly creeping into their faces, but Amara did not stop. "While you mocked me, I worked. While you slept peacefully, I stayed awake building something with my own two hands. Every tear you made me cry, I turned into fuel. Every insult became my reason to keep going." Her chest rose and fell, her voice trembling only with emotion, not fear. Her cousins shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The aunt who had ridiculed her stared down at her glass of wine, unable to look her in the eye. Even her uncles, usually loud and commanding, sat quiet as children caught in their lies. Amara placed her hand on the table gently, her black platinum card still resting beside her. "And tonight I paid for all of you, not because I owe you anything, but because I wanted you to see the truth. I was never worthless. I was never a failure. You just chose not to see my worth." The words hung in the air like thunder. The entire hall seemed to grow tense. Strangers at nearby tables, who had heard parts of the humiliation earlier, now turned fully to watch. Some nodded softly, admiration shining in their eyes. A woman at another table whispered, "She's incredible," as if speaking to herself. Amara's tears sparkled under the restaurant lights, but her back was straight, her voice unshaken. "I came tonight hoping for love, hoping maybe things had changed. But all I found was mockery. And still I chose to pay, not to prove myself to you but to prove something to me. That no matter how you see me, I know who I am." The silence after her words was deafening. No laughter, no whispers, nothing but the sound of her strength filling the room. For once, it wasn't her who looked small, it was the very people who had tried to break her. Amara picked up her card and slipped it back into her handbag with quiet grace. She didn't need applause, she didn't need validation. She had spoken her truth, and that truth was enough. The silence at the table was so heavy it felt like the air itself had frozen. No one dared to laugh anymore. No one dared to make another cruel joke. Their eyes shifted nervously, searching for the right words, but nothing seemed enough. Finally, her uncle cleared his throat, his loud, confident voice now trembling. We didn't mean it like that," he muttered, his eyes darting everywhere except toward Amara. The man who once called her a disappointment couldn't even meet her gaze. But Amara saw the truth written all over their faces. Shame, envy, humiliation. They had mocked her for years, convinced she was nothing, only to realize in one single moment that she had become everything they secretly wished they could be. Her cousins, the same ones who had laughed the loudest, now looked uncomfortable, their smiles gone. One cousin tried to force a laugh, but it came out awkward and hollow. Another leaned closer to Amara, whispering, "We were just joking. You know we love you." But even her voice shook, betraying her fear. Amara sat still, her chin lifted, watching them unravel. She didn't need to say a word. Their regret spoke louder than anything. The ones who once ridiculed her for not having a husband, for not wearing designer clothes, now sat in silence, comparing their own shallow achievements to the empire she had built in secret. Her aunt, the one who had mocked her about paying for dinner, fiddled nervously with her glass. "You should have told us," she said softly, as if trying to soften the blow of her own cruelty. "We didn't know you were successful." But even in her words, Amara could hear the jealousy, the sudden shift from mockery to desperate respect. Another cousin, who had joined in the laughter earlier, leaned forward with teary eyes. "Please forgive us, Amara. We were wrong about you. We didn't realize how strong you are." Her voice cracked as though the weight of her own guilt was too much to bear. Around the table, heads bowed, shoulders slumped. It was as if the entire family had shrunk before her eyes. Their arrogance was gone, replaced by unease and regret. They were no longer laughing at her. They were begging for her forgiveness. But Amara didn't rush to comfort them. She let the silence linger, let them sit in the mess they had created. For years, she had carried the weight of their words, their scorn, their rejection. Now, for the first time, they carried the weight of her truth. Strangers in the restaurant still watched, some whispering to each other, others staring at Amara with admiration. To them it was clear. The woman who had been humiliated minutes ago was now the most powerful person in the room. Her family realized it too, and the regret in their eyes would haunt them. Long after that night, Amara rose slowly from her chair, her movements calm and graceful. The soft fabric of her shawl slipped over her shoulders as she adjusted it, her silence louder than any words spoken that night. Every eye at the table followed her, but no one dared to stop her. She looked at them one last time, her voice steady, filled with the kind of strength only pain could create. "I came tonight hoping for love," she said, her eyes moving from face to face. "Instead, I found mockery. But remember this moment well. Money can pay bills, but respect must be earned. And tonight you lost mine." The words fell heavy, leaving no space for excuses or weak apologies. Her family sat frozen, their mouths half open, but no sound came out. They had nothing left to say. Amara picked up her small handbag and straightened her back. With every step toward the door, the weight of years of humiliation lifted from her shoulders. She didn't walk out as the quiet, broken woman they thought she was. She walked out as someone reborn, a woman who had faced her worst pain and turned it into power. The restaurant stayed silent, strangers watching her with awe. Whispers followed her exit, not of pity this time, but of respect. People would talk about this night for years, not about her uselessness, but about the woman who silenced an entire family with her dignity and her millions. And as the door closed softly behind her, Amara knew she had not just left the restaurant, she had left behind